and welcome to this month's LinkedIn Live. Our focus today is on the topic of workplace well-being equity. And I have the most wonderful guest, Maria D. with Kaiser Permanente. Maria, welcome. It's so nice to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Laura. I'm excited to be here.
And I'm coming to all of you from Bend, Oregon. I'm in my sister's celebrity-looking kitchen here. And Maria, where are you coming from?
Sunny San Diego. So
nice.
Beautiful weather. Not too hot today, so enjoying it.
Awesome. So for all of our listeners, as I always ask you to, please write in the chat where you're coming from so that we can see where you're coming from. And AJ, thanks for putting that in the chat there. So Kaiser Permanente not only plays a critical role as a national employer and healthcare provider to tens of thousands of individuals, but it also is intentionally addressing this topic of health and well-being equity, not only in the workplace, but also across the community. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Maria is the one who heads up providing the strategic direction, leadership, and expertise in developing and implementing an enterprise-wide well-being program to support Kaiser Permanente's aim of having the most thriving workforce in healthcare. And I just have to say, Maria, we all know that a lot of healthcare employees have really been struggling now. So particularly, obviously during COVID, but even in the wake of COVID. And so kudos to you all for really tackling that issue. Maria also oversees the National Workforce Wellness, also known as Healthy Workforce Program. And she is also a dedicated volunteer with the American Heart Association, which is actually where Maria and I first got to know one another. I was moderating a panel that she served on at the recent May 2nd inaugural Bay Area Workforce Health Equity event. This is an initiative that has been started. It's a three-way initiative between American Heart Association, Deloitte, and SHRM. So it looks like we've got people coming in here from Los Angeles. We've got Lisa coming in from Chandler, Arizona. Ronnie coming in from Walnut Creek. We've got someone coming in from Huntington Beach. Andrea, welcome. Coming in from Vallejo. Yes, a proud KP employee. Go Maria D. We've got Mark coming in from West Covina, California. Stephanie coming in from, she's the Employee Wellness Coordinator with Valley Children's Hospital. Shira with SF East Bay on Maria's team. Welcome, Shira. So thank you all for being here. And Maria, thanks again for being here with us today. Crystal is also coming in from Indiana. So Maria, let's start off with hearing a little bit about your story and about how you got involved with this work in the first place.
Well, gosh, I was reading a little bit about you, Laura, and I didn't realize you were an ex-gymnast like I was. And yes, that competitive nature. But, I think it's always been in me. I've always been an athlete and always wanted to get into the field. Started off with the desire to get into sports medicine and decided after taping feet for a while, it wasn't quite the thing that I wanted to do. But did some personal training on the side, happened to meet a client who really opened up my eyes and seeing opportunities where corporate wellness could be a thing. She was a Border Patrol agent who got hurt, didn't have any recovery through her traditional physical therapy. I was able to help her, and she was able to carry her firearms again because she was injured. She wasn't getting better through physical therapy. So through the work that I was doing, the government paid for her therapy through my services. So it really just piqued my interest to say, gosh, there's got to be something there that brings in, and really helps people kind of come back to work. And that's kind of where I started my journey in the corporate wellness space. Started off with a vendor, but have been in the healthcare setting for over 15 years. So.
Wow. And I know I just touched on it at the beginning about just how challenging it has been for our healthcare providers and workers. Can you talk a little bit about how that has been for all of you, especially in going through COVID and its aftermath?
Well, gosh, it was tough. Talk about constant change. And it wasn't even just the pandemic, right? We had environmental changes happening from the political environment to, just really all, just the social unrest that followed the pandemic. And even now, recovery is still tough. People are still considering job changes, although we,
Mhm.
new nurses and clinicians in the field. But I think what the bottom line that we have really learned is that we need to be fluid and flexible and ready for change at any moment. And to protect our clinicians and our healthcare workers really requires us to be intentional and we need to listen to the voice of our employees. We think we were in such a reaction mode for so long that now we're kind of taking a step back and trying to understand, well, what is it that our workforce really needs, and really trying to listen to the voice of those at the front lines.
That's great. So we've got some others coming in just to share a little bit of this. We've got Michelle coming in from New York. We've got Shannon coming in from Maryland. Brittany coming in from also from San Diego. Tony coming in from San Diego. So lots of people here. And from our listeners, I just want to encourage you. We've got a wealth of information and keen insights here from Maria. So please feel free to post your questions related to this topic of workforce or workplace well-being equity. So, Maria, let's talk a little bit about how would you even define this idea of workplace well-being equity? What is it? And in your definition, could you touch a little bit on the distinction between equality versus equity?
Yeah. Well, let me start with the later because I think that's quite interesting. I always use my kids as an analogy. So I've got four kiddos, and one has a learning disability. So it takes him a little longer to get his assignments done. And we really try to stay in a rhythm of get your work done during the weekdays. So you have the weekends to kind of spend for leisure time. But it's not the case for one of the kids. And, you always hear that that's not fair. Why does he get extra time? Why is he allowed a B or a C on his grades? And I think, the bottom line is to create inclusive and fair environments so that individuals are able to thrive and, really kind of bring their best self forward. And that really is coming through the lens of equity. You can start at the same place with everyone and have the same expectations, but not everybody will have the same outcome. And so that really means being intentional, adapting to the needs of individuals. So to me, that is the difference between equality and equity. So when you think about workplace well-being equity, it really requires you to think more holistically about wellness programming, well-being programming in general. It's less about the individuals like it used to be, but it's more about the individuals, the settings that they're in, the culture that they're operating in, and down to systemic changes that need to happen in an organization so that people are able to thrive. So I think that's the main difference. It's no different than what we've been doing in the past. What's different is the way that we approach the work.
I think one of the best ways that helps me to understand the need for not just equality but equity, and the distinction between the two is this idea of wellness privilege and how some people have unearned privileges or benefits that others don't. And so, for example, if we think about the workforce and how there are some individuals within the same workforce that are earning a lot more than others, is it fair for those individuals who are on the lower wage scale to be paying the same for their insurance premiums than the people who are at the very top who are earning really high bonuses? That certainly is the difference. It really points to the need for equity over equality. I know that's also something that the Kaiser Family Foundation has really been looking at. Is that something that you all that you're trying to do in your program to ensure that there's some equity in terms of what are the insurance premiums that the employees are paying?
Well, we're taking a really, really broad approach to equity. It's not just about pay equity. I mean, this is really kind of scaled to how we look at equity in terms of outcomes of our patients and members, getting involved in the community so that we're addressing access issues and influencing organizations to make healthcare more accessible. And in terms of the workforce, so to us, it's three-pronged. So we've got a full strategy in place where we look at three distinct priority areas: our workforce, our care, right, health equity, and then the work we do in the community. And so for our workforce, we really look at that as we can't deliver what we don't experience ourselves. So it's so crucial that our workforce experiences equity in all sorts of ways. And that's things from representation. You know, do our leaders represent the demographics of our workforce? To pay equity issues, right? To hiring practices. So the full gamut of what we do within needs to really be evaluated. And we're just starting our journey with that at Kaiser Permanente. The great news is we have some foundational commitments. There's a long-term strategy and plan. We even rolled out what we called equity principles to guide behaviors of all of us as employees of Kaiser Permanente. So we're living up to our mission and vision. So it really is kind of a broad, approach, very comprehensive approach and long-term approach to addressing equity at its core.
I'm really curious about, kind of there's been this long-time belief in the power of individual habit formation. And, I just yesterday I was having a conversation with someone and she said, "Oh, I've got this great workshop that teaches people how to change habits. And, this one is different from others." And I found myself really kind of getting annoyed by her even talking about that. But I'm just curious about what your thoughts are on this longtime belief in the power of individual capacity to even be able to make change in their individual habits. And is it ignoring some of these larger cultural, environmental, and systemic issues, and perhaps even this long-time belief in the power of individuals making change? Has that actually fueled what we're seeing, which is a decline in overall health and well-being?
Yeah, well, I think, now we're seeing more than ever the strong connection between mind and body, right? And I think when you look and approach work from a behavior change lens, again, you're focusing just on the individual. And that's a great place to start. You need to start there, but you also have to consider the environment that you're operating in. And I think this is, mental health, I think has been often ignored when you think about comprehensive, successful, outcome-based programs. But what you really need to look at is the whole employee experience, not just the behavior change, but even the way that the environment that you're creating in order to enable the change and empower the change. I think that's the missing ingredient. And I think that's where we are today. I think that's why the focus on culture change, creating, inclusive environments where people feel like they belong, will lead to better outcomes, and they go hand in hand. But I think we've not really quite thought about programming in that way, and it's so crucial, especially now with ever-changing work environments.
And I'm curious, Maria, in your efforts to bring about this kind of more really outside-in approach to behavior change, understanding the context within which the individual operates, have you experienced some pushback from people either internally or perhaps even externally who still really see behavior change as something that's more individually driven?
I don't necessarily see it as pushback. I think people still yet have to recognize or understand the role that they play. In my opinion, everybody in the organization has responsibility to advance well-being. Everybody has a role. recruitment, HR, I mean, operations, everybody has a role. But I don't think people see it as such. You know, sometimes they often think it's a department, it's the programs, it's an afterthought. They don't look at it as a business strategy. I mean, take mental health as an example. If a manager gets placed, promoted to a new manager role, and you haven't experienced, you know, bad dynamics on a team, have we equipped them with the skills necessary to improve psychological safety on their team? I don't think we've really quite thought about programming in that way, you know, versus just throwing walking challenges and programs at them without really understanding, again, what's happening surrounding them. Particularly in healthcare, we're still challenged, right, with workload challenges and issues. Sometimes we're still facing morale issues. We're still climbing out of the impacts of the pandemic and all that came with it. And so it's so super crucial to kind of start with how people are feeling and really adapting programs to the needs of your teams, of the individuals. So, you know, it's different. You know, it's really kind of taking behavior change and looking at that very, very differently, because if you don't put people in the right environment, you can't expect them to make those positive behavior changes. It just doesn't happen. I mean, I think you would understand too, Laura. We know very well the things that we should be doing, the things that we do, but the moments a crisis happens, I mean, things go awry. I know I still have a difficult time getting back on track with the things that I've said I've done, the things that I want to do. So we know it's not easy. You just have to be adaptable, and things will constantly change. So, you know, it's just, I think we have to take a more comprehensive look at how we really are going to achieve the things and our goals that we're really setting out for ourselves.
You know, I often talk about, Maria, this idea that, you know, for a long time we've believed in the idea that we are creatures of habit. And I would argue that, in fact, we are more creatures of culture. And so much like fish, if we're swimming in healthy water, we're likely to be a lot healthier. Whereas we could be the healthiest fish in the world, but if we're swimming in unhealthy water, it's hard to be healthy, and it's hard to make that healthy choice. So I love that you all are really focusing in on the experience. So here we have a question from Leslie. How does KP create an environment of equity amongst providers, staff, administrators to see adherence to overall well-being goals?
Yeah, well, there's a few things that we're doing organizationally. In terms of creating the environment, we kind of we're looking at a transformational model, and it kind of looks at three things. The model is priorities, habits, and systems. So under priorities, really making it core and central to the mission and vision of who we are as an organization. Those are the things I talked about, you know, setting new equity principles, a really robust, comprehensive equity execution plan, as we call it, and really built into our enterprise strategy. So that's kind of setting the expectation of how we all behave, and really guiding the work that we do and how we operate in order to achieve the mission and vision of our organization. Secondly, when it comes to habits, things like training. So we have like a Belong at KP training, really designed to disrupt bias. It's really there to help us understand the roots of racism and kind of re-examining racism. And really helping us build behaviors that are going to create more inclusive environments. Programs for leaders, like something that we call I Lead. So there's things that we have in place in order for us to help change some of the habits that we've had, and really start to operate in a way that creates more inclusive environments. And then finally, systems changes. So that's all the things that we were talking about, really looking at just as a workforce, the things we need to do, and looking at those things through a lens of equity. So practices, representation, policies, I mean, you name it. I mean, really taking a look at every aspect of how we operate and seeing where we have opportunities to improve. So all those things combined is really guiding our efforts. I should say that even though we talk about a lot, we're still starting our journey. It's a long-term journey. But those are the things that really are helping to guide our work.
So Maria, I often think of there being four key groups in the workplace. They're the the top leaders, and I often call them the trendsetters. There are the people like yourself who are in roles that are designed to intentionally bring well-being to the workforce. So I call these people, people like myself as well, the activators. There's the broader employee base, which I call the self-starters. And then there are those managers who are often overlooked in our well-being efforts. And I call those the permission givers. So I know that Kaiser Permanente has been doing a lot around activating managers to really take a lead role. And I'm curious about how that fits in this three-part system of priorities, habits, and systems. How are you helping them in equipping them to really be able to play their role in this?
Yeah, well, again, we're kind of starting our journey and really honing in and focusing in on how to better support our managers. We actually did an internal, we have an internal survey that tells us how our workforce perceives how we're supporting the health and well-being of our workforce. And one of those questions has to do with managers and their support of their direct teams. That in the beginning was our lowest scoring item. And so we paid a lot of attention to ways that we can help support our managers and things like how do we make it easier for them to access the tools. We know that they don't have all the answers, and we know that they get pressures from above and they get the pressures from their teams. At the same time, they're the face to our organization, right? They know what is going on firsthand with their teams, and they have probably the best ideas on what we can do to make meaningful impact. So what we try to do is a combination of things. First of all, we're really big on recognition. So we try to make sure that, we're recognizing our managers for the work they're doing, and not even just managers, individuals and everyone for the jobs that they're doing, and so that they know that they feel valued. We have manager toolkits to try to make it easier. And what we've done is looked at the best practices across our organization. We've invited people to share their stories about what worked well. And we created a manager toolkit with real case studies about what worked well. And in that survey that I mentioned, we looked at the high performers who had high scores and took stories from those high performing managers and created case studies with that. So, so we're really intentional about supporting our managers and really equipping them with easy tools so that they're, have an easier time to talk with their teams, to influence and motivate and inspire their teams. And we continue. The work's still not done. There's still a lot of work to do. I know that there's still burnout is still, pretty visible, and we still feel that our managers are still going through burnout. So in terms of supporting them from their easy resources to ways that we can support their mental health, creating safe spaces for them to kind of bring forward issues, we're looking at a variety of different programs and resources.
And I know that you all also have a leadership training program for them and for your managers. And in fact, the woman who leads those was at the event. Can you tell us a little bit about that training program?
Yeah,
and then we'll answer this question here. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've called it, we call it Thrive Boss. And again, it's not even just for managers. We actually started this intentionally for senior leaders, because one of the questions, again, in that survey was for managers, but there was another one about senior leaders role modeling well-being. And that was also low scoring. What we learned from that, though, was that every leader actually defined well-being very differently. For some, it was the traditional wellness aspects of healthy eating, running, staying physically fit. And in other terms, people were just like, it's just about me being well and mentally feeling good. And so we created a program to help leaders understand how to model well-being, and, just really equipping them with some basic tools to have discussions with their teams and to really kind of pull through the teams, like what's important to them, so that they're listening for one, and creating goals as a team too, and really, allowing that leader to have an opportunity to share their own either personal story or their own commitment to well-being. So, Laura, I have to say, we learned a lot from the work that you've done. I mean, that multifaceted approach that you spoke to is the very thing that guides us in our work, and making sure that we really have a plan for not just senior leaders, for managers, and that we're also empowering our workforce to take action and really advocate for themselves. So thank you for bringing that up. We're really proud of that program. And yeah, Kelly Ricos, who leads our programs, has done a fantastic job really helping our leaders see the value that they bring and the impact that they make.
That's great. And could we go ahead and bring that question up again? Ronnie mentioned Maria and her team recognized managers with their annual Culture of Health Manager Honor Roll, and they showcase best practices. So would you like to touch briefly on that, Maria?
So that was the program that I was referencing. So the Culture of Health Manager Honor Roll is basically a Culture of Health index. So those questions that we survey every year, we pull out the high performers and we invite them to come share what has worked for them. And it's an annual event. They all get to come up. They get to share their story. We pull up all their names and we invite their managers, which a lot of their senior leaders will show up and thank them for the great work they're doing. And we take all of those stories and refine our manager toolkit every year to feature those stories. And, I will never forget at our last session, we saw a comment that said, I think it was 20 plus years at Kaiser, and they had never been recognized in that way before. And so those are the types of things that we know make a difference. So the time that we're taking to recognize our managers is such a value add. So thank you for bringing that up, Ronnie. We're really proud of that program.
It's interesting, Maria. I had the chance to actually work with the department at Kaiser Permanente, and what I noticed in that department is that there was one team in particular that was a bright spot in that department. They were the ones who really were the most cohesive, just really worked well together. And when I asked that department, or that team rather within the department, what is it that makes the difference? Why is it that you all are really the kind of the bright spot in this department? And every single member said, it's our team leader. It's our team leader. And I think a lot of times, though, that type of team leader is not necessarily recognized for the work that they do, but it is, and I think in many cases, it's kind of gone under the radar until now. So it's great to hear that you all are starting to highlight that. So Maria, can you share with us, we're talking again, this topic of workplace well-being equity. What are your top 3 takeaways for our listeners here around how they might bring this to their workplace?
Yeah, and before I do that, I know that I glossed over in one of the last questions, Laura, about how do we measure and how do we know that this is working and impacting our work? So I talked about that Culture of Health Index, which is about recognition, but through our data, and there is dashboards that really track all the work that I've talked about in that equity space. But more importantly, what we do look at is through that Culture of Health Index, how that ties to business outcomes and performance outcomes in terms of reducing absenteeism, reducing workplace injuries, improving patient satisfaction. So we have been able to highlight that teams that improve a culture of health actually do impact the bottom line and, our organization outcomes. So I just wanted to call that out because there was a metric question in there that I didn't address. So top 3 things that I would say if you're looking to really move the work with a focus on managers, make it easy. Our managers have quite a bit on their plate. And so the more and more that you can make it easier for managers to kind of just turn on things, talking points, we've seen that worked really well for us. Secondly, give managers a voice and a platform, a safe space to share not just issues, but also share solutions, co-designing, leverage your managers to really inform meaningful change and to create impactful programs within your organization. And lastly, recognize them. I think we owe it to our managers to really help them see the value that they bring to the organization. And it's such a crucial role, especially in the work of well-being. So honor them, value them, recognize them for the work they're doing. So those would be the top 3 things that I would leave the audience with.
And it's interesting that in talking about the broader topic of workplace well-being equity, that your top 3 takeaways have really focused in on those managers. And I think that our managers are kind of our unsung everyday heroes who really, really can make all the difference for the people that they lead. And so as organizations, we can think about how we can best support and empower them so that they can do the work that, the well-intended work that they all want to do. So can you tell us a little bit, Maria, about how we can, people can stay in touch with you and how they can follow your work?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn, so please feel free to reach out and connect. I'm happy to be a resource to you and answer any questions. Besides the work I do at Kaiser, I'm just passionate in this work out in the field. So as you said, partner with the AHA and other organizations. So please feel free to reach out, and I look forward to connecting with those of you here today.
And for all of our listeners, we will be reconvening for our next LinkedIn Live, which is on August 8th, 11 to 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Our guest this time will be Carol Robin, who taught the legendary interpersonal dynamics course at Stanford GSB, Graduate School of Business. She's also the co-author of the highly acclaimed and award-winning book, Connect. So this session will really tie into, as you all know, this is my summer of love. So the importance of love and connection for each of us personally, but also how we can bring that into the workplace. Maria, I want to thank you so much for being our amazing guest today to start to unpack this incredibly critical issue of workplace well-being equity. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for being with us. Alana and AJ, thank you for helping to manage this. We will see you all on August 8th. Thanks again.
Thank you.